Pauline, um, your parents came to Australia from England. You lived in Helensburgh, a small rural town. Could you tell us about the life of the women in the 50s? Because I think there is much to say, and your experience is precious for younger people, especially women.
Yes, I think my men pretty much dominated women back in the 50s. I think a woman's role in the house was mainly to look after their children, do the cooking and housework, and they didn't really have a life outside the home. When men used to socialise, quite often they'd socialise with other men, come home drunk, and quite often there was a lot of domestic violence due to alcohol abuse. Men, I guess to fit into society in Helensburgh, you really needed to drink. If you didn't drink, you were classified as a wowser. So it was a little bit of a stigma. You didn't really have a lot of friends. Also shouting drinks was very popular, so you might not have intended to get drunk, but you did. Women pretty much relied on their husbands for their money. My mother actually got a job out at Garrawarra. She was working as a domestic, but when she got paid on a Friday, her wages were handed over to my father. He would dish out housekeeping money, which had to pay for all the household expenses, and he would keep the rest. He was supposed to pay the bills, but alcohol and cigarettes were first priority, and quite often the bills didn't get paid. Then he would ask my mum for money out of the housekeeping money to buy cigarettes or alcohol. If she didn't have any, there was a fight, and domestic violence was rife in our household. So without the cigarettes and the drink, it was very, very difficult. As a child, I just lived with the constant fights and arguments between my mother and father, and what was supposed to be a wonderful life coming to Australia ended up to be a nightmare. One of the big problems was not having any family support. My mum and dad both left their parents at home back in the UK. All our aunties and uncles were over there. We had no family. You pretty much had to rely on friends and neighbours to sort of talk to, but everyone else had their own problem. There was also a lot of gossip, so if someone did find out that you had a problem, pretty much the whole town would find out about it sooner or later, and there was a bit of a stigma put on your family. So it was very difficult. As a child, we had very limited money, so I think when my mum went back to work, she thought it was going to make a big difference, but it really didn't. I remember one time we were going to get evicted out of our house. We were in government accommodation, and my father said, I was only little. He said, tell the rent man that we're not home. And I opened the door and I said, my dad said to tell you that we're not home. And I got such a beating for that because my father was furious. I was only a little child, so we were always getting the power cut off. Yes, it was very difficult, but even though my mother worked, she did not have her own money. She still didn't have any independence. She did what my father wanted her to do. Men pretty much did what they wanted to do, but they had a lot of control over their wives. But it was quite common with a lot of families. It wasn't just our family, but whatever happened in your house pretty much stayed in your house.
Mm. You work for legal aid and specialise in criminal law. Now, you told me that you became a different person when you started working in general. Why is that? Why did you become a different person?
I think gaining independence, when I first went back to work, I remember the first pay packet I got, and I went to Myers, and I was actually able to buy a skirt using my own money. To me, that was, I still remember, it was a denim skirt. It got to a point where I didn't have to ask my husband for money to buy a dress. I used to ask him, he'd give me $20 and say go out and buy a dress. I used to go out and buy fabric and I would make a dress. So with money came independence. I also realised that I could do a lot more than I thought I could. So it gave me confidence. I had to learn the job to start off with. I started working for a lawyer. I'd never been into a lawyer's office, so it was very, very difficult. But I persevered and I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a go of this. I ended up staying there for 9 years, and he told me I was the best employee he'd ever had. Unfortunately, the business folded, and I then got a job at Legal Aid. That opened up a whole new world, working in criminal law. I only started working as a temp for 8 weeks. I got offered another job and I said, look, I'll just give it a little bit more time. But gradually I sort of fell into the whole world of criminal law. And I think it just made me realise how much was going on in the world that I didn't know about. I credited a lot of the problems that people had, especially criminals, to their upbringing. So when you have a hard life as a child, a lot of criminals come from very harsh backgrounds. Their parents could be alcoholics. They could suffer a lot of violence, family violence as children. So when they grow up, they really find it hard to readjust. They sort of follow that trend. I think one of the saddest things was seeing how many children end up in the legal system, and quite young children as well. So it really was an eye-opener. But I loved the independence. I took on as many roles as I could. I acted up in jobs that I'd never done before. And I thought, you know what? I never thought I would ever be able to do this. So to me it was a major breakthrough, and I ended up staying there for 17 years.
Oh, 17.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
And I got another question. Do you think it's important for a woman to have her own wages?
Oh, definitely. I don't think men realise how important it is for women to have independence, but a lot of men don't like it. They're quite, I look at it as a control thing, where men like to control their wives, and I think Terry struggled with that when I went back to work. All of a sudden he was wondering why I was going for lunch with the people I worked with, you know. Well, I said, well, that's what we do. I'm working now. So he wanted me to go back to work, but he struggled dealing with the independence I had when I did that. So I think it gives you self-worth, and it just makes you realise your potential. A lot of people think they can't do anything, but it's amazing what they can achieve. So that sense of achievement is really important.
Yes. You told me also that you started working as a volunteer some time ago for Neighborhood in Helensburgh. What are you doing there with them?
Okay, I think I reached a point in my life when I first retired. I thought my husband and I were going to be able to just have a wonderful life. My plans were to travel. We had a little bit of super between us. I thought we were going to do all the things we couldn't do while we were both working, because I only had 12 years where I didn't work. Unfortunately, he went back to work and now he has health problems. We never got to achieve any of that. And I think I found myself in a bit of a rut. So I did the projects that I wanted to do. I had things to do, but I wasn't really focused on doing that. And I found I was walking around the house thinking, what am I going to do today? I can't keep going on like this. So I thought I really need to do something to occupy my time, and I want it to be useful. So I signed up with Neighbour Aid. I only did it as probably a temporary thing. I thought I'll see how I go. I've also joined up as a client, and I feel like if I'm going to be accepting services that they offer, I really need to be able to contribute as well. So as a client, I can access their services, but as a volunteer, I can help people bring a bit of happiness, I guess, into their lives, and to enable them to do the things that they wouldn't normally be able to do. I was quite amazed at the problems some people have, and I think loneliness is a big issue. A lot of people are living a single life, that their partner has died or is in a nursing home, and they're just at home alone. So they have outings, but they need help to be able to do that.
Yes, and by working with Neighborhood, you have noticed that a lot of old people cannot have access to the information they need because they don't have a smartphone, or they don't have a computer, or they don't know how to use it. We assume that people know how to use a computer, but it's not true.
Yes.
And this is a serious problem because most of the information today comes through electronic messages. What would you like to say about it?
I think this is a double-sided problem. We have the issue with technology. I'm amazed at people who are even younger than me who have no idea how to use a computer or a smartphone, or they don't have one at all. But also I have issue with the government dealing with things this way. There should be other means of people to be able to access information without having to use a smartphone or a computer. One of the things I was talking to the librarian about this morning was I think libraries should have libraries aren't just about borrowing books these days. They have implemented services, say, for young children where they have reading and things like that, but there's nothing really for older people to access. There may be down at Wollongong, but how are older people supposed to get down there if they have a disability or they don't drive? It's very difficult. You really have to step into their shoes to find out what it's like to be living with a medical issue. Being able to get down to Wollongong, I don't know what services they might have, but I think they need to have someone coming to the library on a regular basis so people can go to the library and say, can you help me sign up to MyGov or Centrelink or anything else that they need to get in. They've got computers down there. They could have little computer courses at all the libraries to help people to learn how to use technology, even smartphones. So when I was talking to the librarian, she was going to maybe put that forward to Wollongong Library to see if there's any chance of changing things. But even things like banks, you know, the credit union here is closing down. Well, Corrimal's closing down. So to people to go to the credit union, they have to go to Wollongong. Not everyone has a car. Not everyone can drive. So you have to take into account that we have an elderly population who need access to this information. And we have an ageing population. We have the baby boomers. So we have a lot of people who are getting older that need help. And I don't know if the government realise how hard it is.
Yes. And I think we talked about that a lot. Older people feel undervalued. And they have a lot to offer. You have a lot to offer, Pauline. Your experience, yes. The women in the 50s, a lot of things we are sort of forgotten. We forgot about that, you know. We had a women's lib and then we sort of forgot the past. And we think things are always been like they are now.
Yes.
But no, at all. And so older people feel undervalued and they are dismissed. And you know, what is your position and what would you like you to say to people who dismiss older people? What is your message?
I think the problem is there's not a lot of communication between older people and young people, even within families. I don't think we have the connection that probably I had with my mother. My daughter comes down to visit, but we don't really have lengthy conversations about my life. It's all about what's going on now. And I think there's a lot of older people that have a lot to offer. When I started at Neighbour Aid, I thought I'm going to have to look at my strengths. What am I good at? Having a conversation with an older person means so much, even someone with dementia. So I was visiting a man who has dementia. I was doing it as a friend. If I speak about the present, he doesn't remember. He probably couldn't remember what he had for breakfast. But when I start talking about the past and his achievements and what he did when he worked, when he was young, he can engage in the conversation. But I think people are so busy now. Elderly people are just there, and I think to some people they're just a pain in the neck. They're just they're a nuisance. It's like and I think the health system is also a problem. I think a lot of older people go undiagnosed for things, either because they don't tell the doctor that they have a problem, and I think mental health illness sort of falls into that category. I think there's probably a lot of people out there that are older that have depression, but it's not diagnosed because the doctors are probably looking more at their physical issues, that the depression gets overlooked. And I think men have a particular problem as well. It's so I just feel like the older people are sort of falling through the cracks a little bit, and we live in a world where we're getting disconnected with the outside world. We live in our own we live the way that we've been brought up and what we've learnt, but the rest of the world is moving on, and we're sort of stuck in this world that we're happy in, I suppose, to a certain extent, but we find it hard to connect with the outside world because they really find it hard to connect with us as well. Even when I was talking to the librarian this morning, she said, I had no idea that older people felt like that. And I said, well, you know, maybe talk to your parents. So
yeah, it's sad, isn't it?
It's very sad. Because I think they have a lot to offer.
Yeah, of course, yes, they have.
I was talking to an 88...
precious, they're very precious.
Yes. I was talking to an 88-year-old on one of our Neighbour Aid outings, and she was sitting in the bus crocheting. And I said, I never learnt to crochet. And she said, would you like me to teach you? Here I have an 8-year-old that I'm supposed to be helping, and she's offering to teach me how to crochet, and I thought that was just so precious.
Yes, it is wonderful.
So I'm going to take her up on it.
Yes, 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 yes.
Because I think for her, teaching me to crochet,
yeah.
She's going to feel like she's achieving something as well. So as well as me learning, yes, I can do a lot. I can sew. I can, and I'd love a young person to come up and say, "Would you teach me how to sew?"
Yes.
So yes.
Yes, you have a lot to offer. What have you got to offer, Pauline, to our society? And what would you like to say, honestly, to our new government?
I think look, at the moment, I'm just focusing on living day to day, trying to help my family. I just want people to be happy. And if it just means having a conversation, so I'm hoping through volunteering with Neighbour Aid I can make a little bit of a difference to people's lives. And I'm also learning. I'm learning how to be patient, because if someone's had a stroke and they can't walk very fast, you have to wait for them. I'm learning, just telling a joke on a bus trip and making people laugh. So I'm just trying to access my strengths and pass any knowledge that I have on to people and converse with them. As I said, there's people just sitting at home watching TV all day and they don't have any contact with the government. I think they need to look at the way they do things. They need to make it easy for older Australians to be able to... You also have people that don't speak English. English isn't their first language. And I think if I have an issue with that, how do older people deal with it? And how do older people that don't speak much English manage this? We're reliant on our children to help us out now, but children are so busy. They've got their own issues, they're working, they're looking after their kids. A lot of them can't, they don't live close by. They can't help that much. So it's really important that the government realise that, and they have to sort of try and implement programs that are a lot easier for people to access.
Yes, and your idea of the library is quite fantastic, yes. Having someone to help other people and
so I think
paperwork
if the council can, we're supposed to be getting a new community centre, and I'm thinking that that's going to encompass a library. Why can't it encompass a community information centre where, as part of the library?
Yes, it's a very good idea.
Yeah, so people can, even if it's only open one day a week, where people could go up there and just ask for advice on technology or learn technology. It's just very important. And I think without technology these days, it's very, very hard. Even I find it difficult. And I'm pretty computer savvy.
Yes, you are.
Yes, so yes, I don't know. And you also get people who are probably in the early stages of dementia. You also have the privacy laws that make it really difficult for people to advocate on your behalf if they need to get information. Yeah, so my mother had dementia, and I just found it very difficult, trying to talk to Telstra about her account, because but she couldn't do it herself.
Yes, yes. Well, that's a lot of information, Pauline. That's very, very inspiring, and I thank you so much. I'm so glad that I met you, and I'm so glad that I'm able to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Yes,
My
thank
pleasure,
you. Thank you
Catherine.
so much.